You're listening to the Four Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the four phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello there. Dr. Alex here with you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad that you're here. Today, I'm going to be talking about forgetting to do stuff and what is really important to us. This is a kind of an event that happens a lot to us when we are not congruent with our identity that we're living from. We tend to run into this a lot. So you'll most likely feel like you can relate to this in some area of your life, if not a lot of areas of life. This was brought to my attention recently. I was reminded of this because we went through our habit challenge and we're starting our health transformation accelerator program. There's a lot of people who return to things like our 4-day challenge every single time we do it and do the next layer that they're working on, then go on with HTA. And because people come back and do it repeatedly, a lot of times what we hear is that people will say things like, "Oh, right, I heard you say that before." Or it applies to the podcast. "Oh, I heard you say that before I started it, but then I forgot." This is one of those things that can really show us where we are living in fragmentation and are living in discrepancies of what we say that we want and all of us that actually believes that we want that. So here's how this goes. We don't forget the things that are important to us, or at the very least, we don't forget for long the things that are important to us. When we have things like ways of eating or interacting with the people in relationship in our lives or doing things for our health, like getting into parasympathetic state, right? If we say we want healing, we get into the healing state routinely. When we forget, and we forget often, that is a clue about what's really going on at the brain level and within your entire beingness at large. Most of the time, the things that we say are important to us, but we do not act like they are important to us, as in we forget to do it, but say that it's important to us. Usually, what that represents is that it is a part of us that thinks that it is important, though it is not yet the dominant part of us that thinks that it's important. Otherwise, we wouldn't forget about it. Right? You don't normally, you might have moments, but if you have kids, you don't normally forget that you have them. I mean, speaking as the person whose dad left her in the public bathroom as a kid, it happens. No judgment. And at the same time, most of the time, you're probably going to remember it. Most people don't forget about their partner. Most people don't forget about their job or their business, right? These big things that are truly our identity. When we say something is important but we forget, it is simply saying that overarchingly in our identity, it is not truly as important to us as other things. Now, when I first was chewing on this concept, it does kind of suck, right? Because I like telling myself the story that something is important to me. especially when I have deemed it being important to me as part of the journey. This happens a lot with getting into parasympathetic mode because people tend to forget doing that kind of rewiring of the brain. It's also really common that people forget to feel and process their emotions, right? You're just kind of in it. Oh, I'm annoyed now, but people don't necessarily think, hey, I should go do something about it that processes this emotion so that I don't have to have it stored in my system and dragging it around with me. That's making me feel uncomfortable and unhappy. The thing is, that all sounds good, but oftentimes those are things that we're like, I wish I remembered to do that. And as we've talked about here on the podcast before, there's a huge difference between being committed to something and simply being interested in the idea of something. Whatever it shakes out as when you think about this for you, whatever's coming to mind as I'm talking about this, really what this is pointing you in the direction of is a decision that you make moving forward. And that decision is to say, do I want to approach this in a way where I want to bring this into my primary identity or not? Because if it's something that you decided is truly important to you, and it is your intention to merge that with the wholeness of your primary identity of who you are, and for most of you, you're working on being healthy, energetic, passionate, joyful, present, empowered people, right? Something to that extent. The things that we say are important, but that we forget. Now we have an opportunity to say, how does this truly fit into the highest version of me? And how can I bring that more into my everyday experience? How can I habitualize it? Right? Once we give the instructions to the brain of how it fits into our identity, then we can do all sorts of stuff in our physical world, setting reminders, leaving sticky notes, having people remind us, until the brain hardwires it in. But without making that decision and without acknowledging that if we are forgetting something, it's because it is not yet set as a high importance for us. Without doing that, we don't really get the feedback and we don't end up doing the things that create the scenario that we're really looking for, which is it's important to me, therefore I remember to do it and it's top of mind. The other thing that this process does when we look at it this way is that many of us are dealing with lots of parts internally. There's the part of us that wants to be healthy. There's the part of us that wants to cut loose and do whatever she wants. There's the part of us that's the inner child that didn't get what she needed. There's the part of us that wants to model the perfect parent for the kid. There's a million and 10 things that come up when you're talking about parts. And if you start to create a life where whenever each part comes up and is like, hey, we should do this, and then you're like, yeah, okay, cool, that sounds good, and you just add it to the laundry list of competing things that kind of cancel each other out, it's frustrating because you feel like you keep starting new things, implementing new things, doing all the things that people say, and you're not getting the results. Well, a lot of times when we start to look at how is this coming from my unified self, not the parts of myself that are separate from one another, we are forced to pick things that are truly important to us, right? Who listening here has also been with me in the, oh, today on a whim, I say, starting weightlifting sounds fun. And then by tomorrow, that part of me is busy and you don't even remember ever having said that, right? It's just an open loop in your brain where your brain's like, what was I supposed to do again? I better keep, you know, reminding her that there's something she forgot. So then you walk around all day being like, wait, what was I doing? What happened? Right? You probably have had that experience. It's because we want to sort of cut corners a little bit. And I really feel you on this because I want to do the same thing. And yet, this is how it ends up going, right? We start letting the parts dictate on a whim what we think is important, and when we don't stick to it, it breaks the trust between you and you. While less exciting, going through this process of a unified identity is really how we can see how we can cut down to the things that are truly most important to us, not the next shiny object that we came across. So, I challenge you as we come up to wrap up this podcast episode to sit with this concept that says, what if I were to see the things that I don't forget to do are the things that are truly important to me? How can I look at my life through that lens? How can I assess what's going on, what's actually shaping up to be true for you? What aren't you forgetting? What are you forgetting? And then asking, is this my primary, highest identity that is setting this as high importance? Or is this a part that is acting on a whim, or at least on a temporary whim? What you do with that information, then this is the best news of all. What you do with all this information is completely up to you. If you're like, no, Alex, I sometimes forget that, but it's truly important to me. Cool. Now that you know that, you can go do the things that will habitualize it to make it not forgettable, right? You have the capability and you have the tools and the solutions to do those things. But without asking this question and without challenging yourself to look at what your actions are showing you and mirroring back to you, you don't get that information, and you also don't get the outcomes. And let me tell you what, you've probably already lived this, but in case you haven't, it's really painful letting yourself down. It's actually way more painful feeling like you're letting yourself down than a lot of other things, because that fragmentation between you and you, that distrust that says, even when I say it's important, I may not do it, that hurts. That hurts worse than looking at it and being like, hey, I may be acting like this isn't important to me, even though I say that it is. That does sting. And to be honest, I think that requires a pause and to say, how do I approach myself with compassion? Or do I even approach myself with compassion at all? And that may be a question that you need to answer for yourself. But that being said, the sting of that is so much more mild than the sting of living fragmented and knowing deep down that you're not remembering and that you're not prioritizing the things that you say that are important to you and all the parts of you that go along with that. So lots to think about with this podcast episode. This is where I leave you. I'll catch you on the next one, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare, and we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads, and we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.